Hello, travelers, and welcome back to another episode of the Architect's Forge. Today we'll be looking at the final unit of Feudoms in the Song of the Dormant and Song of the Dormant, Beyond Song of the Dormant boxes. That is Verena of Aurtigard, the first high command for the forces of Feudom. And as always, we'll look at her lore before looking at how she plays on the table. Verena of Aurtigard was chosen as High Priestess of the Order of Selas thanks to the influence of her grandfather, Maxence of Aurtigard, Duke of Aurora, known to some as the Son of the Witch. Since she joined the Order, Verena does not hide her disagreements with the Sempiternus, who also does not hide the animosity he feels towards her. And he's not the only one. Pierre Besson, the Grand Magister of the Order of Losna, has also spent time trying to hide the utter contempt he feels for her. But she is shrewd and independent, and is not at all worried about having the highest of the ecclesiastical hierarchy against her. She is not only protected by the secrets held by her elderly grandfather, but also by the blessing of the goddess Selas herself. No one in Feudom has ever achieved the absolute power of Verena's prayers and entreaties, and no one has been able to break either her sense of duty or the firmness of her morals. As a result, the people worship their high priestess, but they are also awed by her. Silence prevails every time Verena, with her tall and majestic bearing, makes an appearance. Aware of the reaction she provokes, she enjoys enhancing them with the distinctions of her position, such as the luxurious ceremonial staff she carries, with which she achieves the most incredible miracles, and the cape that covers her, fluttering behind her back, snapping in the air. On her forehead, a priestly diadem further increases her ability to invoke the disses to tear apart the bodies and minds of her adversaries. Woe betide anyone who dare stand against her on the battlefield. So that's Verena in the lore, and now let's look at her on the table. But before we do, if you are enjoying this, please remember to like, follow, and subscribe. And if you have any thoughts about Verena or any of the other units I've covered, please let me know in the comments. I'm always happy to hear and look forward to hearing different strategies or thoughts that people have on these various profiles. If you're so inclined to want to help support the channel financially, there is a link to a Buy Me a Coffee in the description below, and any money that I get from there just goes into helping me try and further improve the content that we're putting out for you. But with that, let's jump in and see what Verena's like on the table. Beginning with her basic stats, she comes in at an average cost for an attachable officer, a higher end, but I'd say average for a high command at least, at 35 points. Definitely not cheap, but for a high command it's kind of be expected that you're going to be playing quite a bit. She does, for that cost, bring 2 command tokens, and as is expected, is an officer. She has an average Feudom speed of 3.2 with a better than average, I'd say, charge of 9. Now, when it comes to wounds, she's actually quite fairly high for a character with 4 wounds, which is quite good, helps her stay alive, especially since, as we'll see, she cannot join any units. She has a good willpower of 2 oranges, which is deceptive because it's actually better than it looks. And she has a high morale of 3, allowing her to activate multiple times fairly easily. As is expected of a character, especially high command, you can only bring 1 of her. She is a noble, which, as we keep saying, is relevant for a number of different abilities in the faction. Now, a number of those are on other high commands, so the main one that this will be affecting, at least as time of recording, is the extra conquest for Guisarmier, if she is nearby. As I've said, she is a high command, which does mean you are precluded from bringing any other high commands at this time. That would be Genevieve or the Magister. She has the elite ability, which is very helpful for both boosting her attacks, her defense, and making her casting more reliable. And as expected of a priestess in this faction, she is a spellcaster, which means along with being able to cast her spells, she will be able to block enemy casts. Now, it is important to note the elite does not apply to that role, but it's still good having somebody that can try and block. Unfortunately, she does bring 0 conquest, which, while unfortunate, is to be expected of most characters. Moving on, let's look at how Verena fares in terms of attack and defense. In melee attack, she brings a red and 2 orange dice, which, thanks to elite, does average 2 3/4 hits with a maximum of 4, which is okay, but realistically, she's better off not fighting in melee. In defense, she has 2 green and a black, which will average 2.5 blocks with a maximum of 5, which is actually quite good, with a potential for a high spike of 5. She's not particularly easy to kill given her defense and her wounds. Now, when you're attacking defending, do not forget elite. Those hollow hits and those hollow blocks will count towards your total successes. So just don't forget that. It's easy to forget in the heat of the moment. Getting into what really makes Verena exciting, and that is her spells. She has 2 spells, the first of which, her offensive spell, is called Priestly Diadem. It allows her to target an enemy unit within 12 strides and resolve a ranged attack. As I said, this is her offensive spell, and she'll be getting a red, 2 orange, and a yellow. This will average 3.38 hits approximately, with a maximum of 5, which is good damage, and even better because you are required to get 2 blocks to cancel each hit, making it so that damage is much more likely to go through, or at least a large portion of it. Now, along with this fairly good damage on her attack, the spell has 3 different alterations. The first of which only works if the target has tinge or the keyword tinge. So again, primarily scions, but also good against fighting other casters, or in the mission The Rift, where anyone ending near the rift markers will be gaining tinge. And what the unit is forced to do is they'll be forced to repeat any die where they got a shield. Situationally, this can be very powerful. So if you actually are targeting a unit with tinge, this is very powerful, because given that your opponent needs 2 shields to block a single hit, making them re-roll any successful dice makes it so they're even less likely to get at least even the 2 blocks needed to cancel 1 damage. The second alteration allows her to increase the range from 12 strides to 18. This is very important and is a very big increase to the range. The main thing being here that it keeps her out of almost all charge ranges in the game. While Verena is relatively survivable, ideally you don't want her being attacked at all, especially by melee attacks, which have the potential to do you generally more damage than ranged attacks. Her final and third alteration requires 2 black dice to be added to the tinge roll, and this just gives you an automatic success, an automatic extra hit. As well, if the target suffers any damage, they will gain 1 stress. Bonus damage is very good, and so is essentially guaranteed stress, because realistically you're probably getting damage through. The extra hit is very powerful, especially considering you need 2 blocks to cancel each hit. So realistically, I think, unless you really can't risk gaining the extra tinge, I think Verena will often be doing the extra damage and the extra range. Now, of note, if you add up all the alterations, it adds up to 4. You can never roll more than 3 of a die in this game, and there's no, blacks become blues. So if you are targeting somebody with tinge, excuse me, or the tinge keyword, then you may as well actually use all 4 if you were going to use the others, because whether you're spending for 4 alterations or 3 makes no difference. Either way, she'll be rolling 3 black dice at the end to see if she gains more tinge. Ultimately, this is a very powerful attack with a very long range that you're going to be using quite often with her. Having looked at the Priestly Diadem, we'll move on to the Blessing of Selas. This is her defensive and buffing spell. You target yourself, and it has a duration of 3 turns. Now, note it does target Verena. So this does mean that it does not require line of sight. That means any of the allies, in this case within 12 strides, will get the benefit of adding a automatic block to their defense when they are targeted by an attack, regardless of whether they can actually see Verena or whether Verena can see them, because it's actually targeting her and not the allied units. An automatic block might not seem like a lot, but it's always, very good. It is essentially one less damage anytime you're being attacked within, range 12 of her. So this is a very powerful ability with, not the best duration, but again, has a large area and a strong effect. And like the Priestly Diadem, it only gets better thanks to the two alterations. The first causes allied units that are being affected, so being within 12 strides, to displace 3 at the end of any activation that they've been targeted by attack. This helps to add extra movement to your units that are often slowed by slower than most of their enemies. The other big thing here is if they're being attacked in melee, essentially your opponent comes in, hits you in melee, you block, hopefully you block all of it. Then, after being targeted by attack, if you're under the effect of the Blessing of Selas, you can displace. This includes being able to displace out of combat. This means that you can open it up, that you can then charge. You can combo this very interestingly with something like the Mace Escort, which have the command ability to charge a unit that ends their activation within, I believe, 12 strides of them. And this often will lead people to charging the Mace Escorts themselves. Now, if you charge the Mace Escorts, and then the Blessing of Selas kicks in, they can displace back, and then now that unit that had charged them has ended within 12, and the Mace Escorts can immediately just charge right back into the fight. The second alteration is, I think, more important, and you'll be using it, in my opinion, every single time that you're casting the Blessing of Selas, and that is to increase the duration from 3 to 5. The longer this spell lasts, the longer the effect is up, the more it is protecting your allies, the more turns that you're getting those extra shields, and more importantly, the longer you can go before needing to activate Verena and have her cast this spell, as opposed to activating her to cast her powerful offensive spell. Having looked at her spells, we look at the final ability on Verena's card, and that is the Ceremonial Staff. This is a command ability and allows her to target an allied unit within 7 strides. It does have a relatively short range with just 7, but given the effect, as we'll see, it's still very much worth it. Of note, she is an allied unit within 7 strides of herself, so that does mean that if she is attacked, you can use this ability on herself. And what does the ability do? What it does is when the target that you're choosing within 7 strides of her is about to suffer damage, Verena gets to make a willpower test. If she succeeds, and remember that's 2 orange dice with elite, so quite likely, if she succeeds, then you get to ignore half of the damage rounding up. Now, of note, the way it is written, you round up the amount that you reduce, not what some people think, which is, you take half damage rounding up, meaning you're taking the larger of the numbers. You're actually reducing by the larger number, so you're taking the lower number. So what this looks like in practice is if you were going to take 3 damage, you have it, that goes to 1.5, you round up, goes to 2, so you reduce the 3 by 2, and you end up, if you were going to take 3 damage, you just take 1. Similarly, if you were to take 1 damage, you can reduce it to 0. This is a extremely powerful ability that can really help keep a little bunker around her alive, especially when coupled with with the Blessing of Selas, further increasing defenses, further, essentially reducing the damage by 1 before you even get to needing to use Ceremonial Staff. So, another very powerful ability on a character that already has 2 very powerful abilities. So that's Verena's card. It's very straightforward in terms of what is on it, and that there's just 3 abilities, but they are quite powerful and can lead to quite interesting tactics and positioning. You'll often see people building kind of little bunkers around her. So Verena is very much a true solo character, and a powerful one at that. She is unable to join any units, which I believe at this point in the game is unique to her as a high command. I believe she's the only high command that cannot join other units, but in return, she brings 3 very powerful abilities, including a very strong ranged attack, a strong buffing spell, and of course, the very powerful ability to reduce damage significantly. Thanks to this kind of desire to have units within close proximity to her because of her buffing spell and the damage reduction, as well as having things like mace escorts near her to help protect her from damage, you can really end up building very synergistic bunkers around her to keep her alive while also buffing the bunker itself. You really, I think, when you're bringing her, want to bring something like mace escorts, because she both makes them more durable and allows them to do some of the tricks that we discussed using her Blessing of Selas spell, but also at the same time make it a lot more viable and to bring her and protect her, because essentially if there's mace escorts sitting nearby her, that's another 6 wounds that you need to chew through before you can actually kill her, bringing essentially the amount of damage you need to do to her to 10, which is especially difficult when she can also have damage with her command ability. So that is Verena of Aurtigard, the High Command, and that is going to be the end of our look at Feudom for now. And we'll be moving on to another faction and looking at their, action pack first starting box plus beyond box, or, in case of CNN, just their action pack. But if you have any other thoughts or strategies you'd like to employ with Verena, or if I got something completely wrong, please let me know. And then remember to like, follow, and subscribe. And with that, we'll see you next time. And until then, may the dice be ever in your favor.